1. In a greasy fast food kitchen, 14-year-old Lila draws strange diagrams on paper cups between orders. Mocked by a Harvard professor, she's told to prove it or leave. With her sick mom as her reason and a flickering desk lamp as her guide, Lila dares to solve a billion-dollar food safety flaw. But will anyone believe a girl in a visor? Lila sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor, paper scraps spread around her like fallen leaves. One hand held a chicken nugget half wrapped in napkin. The other scribbled on the back of a soda receipt with a broken mechanical pencil. The lights flickered overhead. The air smelled like fried oil and old onions. "Mom, did you know sodium nitrate's in this?" she asked, holding up the receipt. From the couch, her mother coughed and wiped her mouth. "Sweetheart, I don't even know how to spell that." Lila smiled. "Me neither. I just sounded out." The Houston apartment was small, the kind where you could see the front door from the toilet and hear the neighbor's TV through the wall. Dishes were stacked in the sink. The fridge buzzed like it had asthma. And taped to the fridge door was a magazine clipping, Harvard's top food science lab, fixing the future of food. Lila had torn it out from an old health clinic magazine months ago. Not because of the ivy towers or the fancy words, but because, deep in the fine print, there was something about food labels, safety testing, ingredient chemistry, big problems. She read food labels like stories. The long ones, the ones with words most kids couldn't say. They reminded her of puzzles. Every time her mom got sick, every cough, rash, or late-night stomach pain, Lila would run to the trash and fish out the wrapper. She kept a Ziploc full of them under her bed. That was her library. At school, science class was slow and stale. She'd answer questions too fast, and the teacher would move on without asking how she knew. At work, she stacked trays, wiped booths, refilled napkins. But her eyes were always somewhere else, on the paper cups, the ketchup packets, the nutritional posters nobody read. One Tuesday night, her shift ended late. Her mom was home early, asleep on the couch, bundled in a thrift store blanket. Lila tiptoed to the kitchenette. She set down her bag, pulled out 3 empty drink cups, and arranged them on the counter. She turned them upside down and drew lines across their bottoms, then arrows, then loops. It looked crazy, but to her, it made sense. She whispered, "If that preservative breaks down at 95 degrees, and this meat holds bacteria longer than that," she paused, "then we've been missing something." She grabbed a 4th cup and began connecting the dots. Literally, circles for variables, arrows for reactions, asterisks for heat thresholds. It was messy, sloppy, but something about it pulsed in her chest like a heartbeat. Just then, her mom stirred. "Lila, it's past midnight, baby." "I know, I'm sorry." She lowered her voice. "I was just thinking about that sauce packet you reacted to last week." Her mom tried to sit up. "Honey, you don't have to worry about that. I'll be fine." Lila didn't respond. She just picked up one of the cups and traced her finger across it like it was made of glass. "It's not random, Mom," she whispered. "I think I see it." Her mom coughed again, then smiled, weak but real. "You always do, baby." Lila cleaned up quickly, stacking the cups in her backpack like fragile treasure. The next day, the fast food joint was crowded. Orders flew, grease sizzled, and in the middle of the chaos, Lila crouched behind the counter, scribbling on the back of a receipt again. A tall man in a suit walked in, flanked by two people in lanyards. They ordered large combos, no cheese. As she handed them their trays, the man glanced at her doodled cups beside the register. He frowned. "What's this?" She froze. Just something I'm working on." He squinted. "That looks like a systems model." "I guess." Her voice was small. "I've been tracking how different temperatures affect additive breakdown in packaging." There was a pause, then he laughed loudly. "Cute! A food model from a fast food girl." His voice sliced the room. Coworkers turned. Customers looked. Lila's hands trembled. She clutched the cup like a shield. "Keep dreaming," the man muttered, walking off. But she didn't move. She just stared down at her plastic diagram, one word echoing behind her ribs like a drum. "Prove it." A week passed. The cups sat in Lila's backpack, smudged with ink and fryer grease. Every time she looked at them, she felt two things: the sting of laughter and the hum of something real. Like an unfinished melody still playing in the back of her mind, she couldn't let it go. On her day off, Lila took the bus across town. She told her mom she was going to the library, but she didn't stop there. She walked 5 more blocks to the community college. She'd overheard once that Harvard was sending someone to give a food science seminar there. Something about packaging models and microbial decay. She wore her cleanest shirt, tied her curls back, and stepped inside the cool, echoing hallway. The lecture room was half empty. A folding table offered stale cookies and a fruit tray. Lila slipped into the back row, notebook balanced on her lap, a mechanical pencil clicking nervously in her hand. At the front stood the man from the restaurant, the same one who'd laughed. She felt her face go hot. She nearly stood to leave, but then he said something that stopped her cold. "We've hit a wall," he admitted, pacing the stage. "Our predictive model failed 3 recent tests. Contamination risk variables aren't behaving the way they should. Heat thresholds are inconsistent across packaging types. We've submitted corrections, but nothing holds." Someone raised a hand. "So what's the plan?" He didn't answer at first, then he smiled, tight and professional. "The official plan is to shelve the model until further review. In other words, we wait." Lila's pencil slipped from her hand. She bent to pick it up, but her eyes stayed locked on the screen behind him. A chart, cluttered with red lines, failed predictions, test gaps. She whispered, "That's the same pattern I drew." The woman beside her glanced over. "Did you say something?" Lila shook her head. "Sorry." After the talk, she stayed behind, pretending to study the display board. The professor packed up slowly, checking his phone, ignoring the small group of students still asking questions. She approached. "Excuse me," she said quietly. He looked up. Recognition flickered in his eyes, then vanished. "I was at the burger place," she said, "last week. You laughed at my cups." He sighed. "Right, the systems girl." "I think I saw what your model missed," she continued, voice trembling. "You didn't adjust for compound interaction at nonlinear temperature shifts. The preservatives break down earlier if exposed to low-grade heat during transport. That throws the whole decay model off." He stared at her. The students behind him stopped talking. Finally, he barked a laugh. "You got all that from soda cups?" Lila swallowed. And a few receipts. He waved her off. Listen, kid, we've got graduate students working full-time on this. PhDs, engineers. We're not rewriting a billion-dollar model because a fast food worker says she found a pattern. But you said it failed, she pressed. You're shelving it? He leaned down, eye level now. Here's a challenge, he said, voice low. You think you're a genius? Fine. Solve it. Write a working correction. Predict the next batch of contamination results. If you're right, I'll read it. If you're wrong, get out of the way. A few students laughed. Others looked uncomfortable. Lila just nodded and left. Outside, the sky was turning pink. She sat at a bus stop, pulled out her worn notebook, and stared at the ink-streaked diagrams. A woman nearby was arguing on the phone. A kid screamed across the street. But in Lila's world, there was only the math, the temperature, the rot, the memory of her mom clutching her stomach after eating a store-bought salad. She ripped out a receipt from her pocket, flipped it over, drew a new variable line, then another. Her broken pencil cracked again, the lead gone. She reached into her bag and pulled out one of the cups, smoothed its edge with her thumb, then wrote on its side, careful, steady. The sun set behind her, but the lamp above the bus stop blinked on, soft, pale, just enough light to keep going. The apartment was quieter than usual. Lila sat on the floor again, surrounded by empty cups and crumpled receipts. Her worn notebook lay open beside her, its pages curled from old grease and humidity. She had taken over the corner of the kitchen like it was a lab. Salt packets as weights, ketchup lids for sorting variables, a single desk lamp clamped to a broken shelf above her. Her mom watched from the couch, wrapped in 2 blankets. "You okay, baby?" she asked. Lila didn't look up. "Yeah, just thinking." "You've been thinking for 3 days." "I'm close." She held up a cup and turned it slowly. Arrows and circles crawled around the surface like a living circuit. The ink was fading in places, but she remembered every stroke, every correction, every failed line she'd crossed out and redrawn. Her mom coughed. "You eating?" "I will." The truth was, Lila had skipped 2 meals trying to line up variables from a test batch the professor mentioned. She hadn't seen the real data, just the chart from the lecture, but the curve was burned into her brain. She whispered, "It's not just decay, it's the reaction curve between the emulsifier and light exposure." She pulled out her calculator. It was missing the 7 key. She pressed it anyway, estimating the input, then paused. The number didn't make sense. She double-checked, did it again. Still wrong. She muttered, "Wait." She stared at her old cup diagram. Something about the angle, the curve near the bottom. It wasn't a straight drop. It bent, sloped weirdly. She picked up a clean cup, drew the curve again, but this time she tilted the cup, letting the ink stretch naturally with the surface. The line changed shape. She gasped. "It's not linear." She scrambled for her notebook, flipping past pages of crossed-out graphs. She drew it again, this time letting the surface warp the curve the way packaging does in real-world conditions. "Mom," she said suddenly, "the curve's elastic, not static. That's why their predictions fail." Her mom blinked at her. "Sweetheart, that sounded smart, but I have no idea what it means." "It means," Lila said breathlessly, "I think I just found the leak." A gust of wind rattled the window. The power flickered. The lamp dimmed. She held her breath. Then the light came back. She exhaled. Her hand shook, but she didn't stop writing. The broken pencil tip scraped the page. She pressed harder, and the lead snapped completely. Ugh! She rummaged through her backpack, found a half-used crayon from work, a kid's meal left over, and began writing with that instead. It was purple, waxy, but it worked. She drew faster now, looping in temperature ranges bacterial growth rates, the way certain preservatives collapsed when the packaging flexed. Her handwriting was a mess. The paper tore at the edge, but the math held. When she finished, she sat back, chest rising and falling. Her mom smiled weakly. That cup must be magic. Lila looked down. It did feel like magic. The same cup the professor had mocked, the same one she'd nearly thrown away. Now it was covered in 3 colors of ink, layers of discovery etched on plastic. She said quietly, I see it differently now. The next day, she brought her backpack to work. During break, she sat in the back booth, the one near the ice machine, and laid out her diagrams. She wasn't supposed to, but no one noticed. Her manager walked by once, gave her a weird look, then kept going. Customers filtered in and out, fries sizzled, orders echoed overhead. But Lila was somewhere else. Suddenly, a hand slammed the table. She looked up. It was the professor. I told you to solve it, he said, not redecorate soda cups. Lila met his eyes. I did solve it, he scoffed. Where's your proof? She reached into her backpack, pulled out her purple streaked notebook, her bent cup, and set them both down. He laughed. This? You want me to take this seriously? She held her voice steady. Try running your failed variables through this curve. Watch what happens at 78 degrees. He hesitated. Then, despite himself, he looked. His eyes moved across her drawing, then stopped and didn't move. The lecture hall buzzed with quiet voices and shuffling papers. Students filled every seat, some leaning forward, some scrolling their phones. At the front, the whiteboard glowed under harsh fluorescent lights. Equations stretched across it like scars. Lila stood by the wall, backpack in one hand, her notebook clutched tight to her chest with the other. Her purple crayon markings had smudged, but the math still held. The cup was tucked inside, wrapped in a napkin. She hadn't been invited. The professor's assistant had seen her diagrams earlier that morning and muttered, Fine, show up. Just don't speak unless called. Now she waited, knees locked, stomach turning. The professor walked in. The room quieted. He didn't look at her, didn't even nod. He launched into the lecture like she wasn't there. Last week, our predictive model failed again, he said, clicking through slides. What we expected at 78 degrees didn't happen. Contamination rose faster. We still have no working correction. A hand shot up. Didn't you mention someone had a theory? He hesitated. A submission. Yes. From an outside source. Another student snorted. What kind of source? The professor glanced her way. A food service worker. The room rustled. Someone whispered, You mean like a janitor? No, said another. Like fast food? A few laughs followed. Lila gripped her notebook tighter. The professor continued. She's proposed a packaging deformation curve, non-linear, based on real-world heat exposure. We'll test it. But for now, it's unverified. Another voice spoke, female, sharp. You're using fast food cups now? More laughter. Lila's cheeks burned. She stepped forward. I didn't ask to be here, she said quietly. I just saw something. The room stilled. The professor sighed. Miss Lila. Lila, this is a professional environment. You're not qualified. She opened her notebook, flipped to the diagram, and held it up. I'm not trying to be qualified, she said. I just couldn't ignore it. A guy in the front row squinted. Are those crayon lines? Yes, she said. Purple. It's what I had. That set off another ripple of laughter. Someone near the back muttered, This is ridiculous. Lila's voice rose, trembling but clear. You can laugh, but your model doesn't work. And mine predicted the failure point within 0.5 degrees. I don't care if it came from a napkin. It's real. The professor stepped toward her. You're basing your logic on packaging distortion? Yes. With no simulations, no equipment, just your eyes and a fast food lamp? She met his gaze. And a sick mom. That silenced the room. The professor blinked. I worked to help pay her bills. She got sick from bad packaging, bad labels. So I started looking. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he turned back to the board. All right, he said, voice flat. Let's test her prediction. Who wants to run the numbers? Silence. Then a girl in the second row raised her hand slowly. I will. The professor nodded. Fine. Input her variables. Let's see if her crayons are smarter than our software. Lila handed over the notebook. The girl took it carefully, flipping pages. Her eyes widened as she read. This is actually detailed. Someone behind her scoffed. Seriously? She ignored them and started inputting numbers. For 5 long minutes, the room stayed quiet except for tapping keys. Then the projector lit up with a chart, a perfect curve, overlapping the test data from the failed Harvard model. It predicted the drop, matched the risk rise, accounted for the deformation threshold. The girl stared at the screen. So, she was right? The professor stepped closer, narrowed his eyes. He didn't say anything. Lila spoke first. You asked for a working correction. He looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't laugh. But another student in the back spoke up. Or she copied it. The mood shifted. Murmurs rose. Someone else added, Yeah, how did a fast food worker even know all this? She probably stole someone's notes. Lila felt her throat close. She looked to the professor, but he didn't answer. He just stared at the board and said nothing. The door slammed behind her. Lila stood alone in the professor's office, clutching her notebook. The walls were lined with degrees, framed awards, photos with men in suits. On the desk sat a Harvard mug, half filled with cold coffee. A whiteboard behind him bore erased equations. He didn't ask her to sit. You like making a scene, don't you? He said, pacing. No, she replied softly. I just told the truth. He stopped, turned. The truth, he repeated. You really believe that what you did out there counts as science? She held his gaze. It worked. He walked to the board and tapped it with the marker. Anyone can get lucky, anyone can guess, but knowledge, real knowledge, is tested, repeated, verified. I'm ready, she said. He turned to her, his jaw tightened. You think this is a game? You walk in here with a fast food cup and think you've cracked $1 billion model? I don't care about the money, she said. I care about what's real. He leaned across the desk. Then prove it. Her heart thudded. I've already. No, he interrupted. Not once. Not just a curve, all of it. I want a working model, a prediction, built from scratch, clean variables, cross-checked logic, and I want it by Friday. She blinked. That's 3 days. Exactly. She swallowed hard. I have work. I have my mom. He straightened up. Then walk away. Silence. She looked down at her notebook, pages bent, edges torn, purple crayon bleeding through. I can't, she whispered. He nodded once. Then don't be late. She walked out with the deadline ringing in her ears. That night, at home, her mom watched her pace the apartment. Baby, what's going on? I have 3 days to rebuild everything, Lila said. They want proof, equations, logic, all clean. Her mom sat up, coughing. Did they finally see what you did? Some did, she said. Others think I stole it. Her mom frowned. That's not right. Lila nodded. But it's what happens. They see my uniform, my backpack. They don't see anything else. She grabbed a stack of old receipts, sorted them by color, date, label. Her hands moved fast, but her mind raced faster. You think you can finish in time? Her mom asked gently. Lila paused. I don't know. She turned toward the counter where her worn notebook sat open under the lamp. The purple crayon lay next to it, dulled down to a nub. I'll try, she said. And she did. She worked through the night, sketching models on recycled wrappers and soda lids. She filled the margins of her notebook with ratios and assumptions. She dug up old articles from the community library's broken search terminal. She charted reaction rates on the back of kids' menus, calculating with her broken calculator and double-checking every number by hand. By Thursday, her fingers were ink-stained and sore. Her eyes burned. She hadn't slept more than 4 hours. She hadn't told anyone at work what she was doing, but she took her breaks sitting on milk crates, sketching patterns on cup carriers. By Thursday night, she hit a wall. One set of variables wouldn't line up. She scribbled them over and over, but they refused to match the test data. Her hands trembled. She looked at the lamp, now flickering weakly. I can't do it, she whispered. Her mom stirred on the couch. You done? No, Lila said, but I can't figure this last part out. Her mom didn't answer right away. Then she said softly, What did you do the last time that happened? Lila thought. I changed the angle. Then change it again. Lila blinked. She opened the napkin-wrapped cup, tilted it in the light, and saw it. The missing slope wasn't wrong. It was sideways. She turned the cup, drew it again. It fit. She gasped. I got it. The last piece snapped into place. She pressed the page flat, circled the final number, and whispered to herself, I'm ready. Friday, 1:47 a.m. The lamp in the corner buzzed like a dying insect. Lila sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by a chaos of receipts, napkins, plastic lids, and old worksheets stolen from the break room recycling bin. Her notebook, worn thin, lay open beneath her hand. Its spine had nearly split, pages stuck together with oil stains and resolve. Her purple crayon had snapped in two. She gripped the stub like a scalpel. Her eyes were heavy, but she forced herself awake. One more page, one more model, one more chance to be taken seriously. Her mom stirred behind her, still wrapped in the double blanket, coughing softly. Lila, come rest. I can't, she whispered. It's due in 6 hours. Her mom has slowly sat up. You've been going for days. You barely ate. Lila didn't look up. I'll eat when it's finished. The pencil lead she'd taped together earlier rolled off the table. She didn't even flinch. Her hand trembled as she traced one final loop, connecting a bacteria degradation arc to packaging shift variables under rapid heat exposure. It looked like nonsense, but it felt right. She sat back and blinked hard. Her vision blurred, then cleared. It's done, she whispered. Her mom's voice cracked. You really did it? Lila nodded. I think so. There was no applause, no fanfare, just the sound of pipes rattling in the wall and the hum of the fridge trying to stay alive. She slid her notebook into her bag, tucked the cup next to it, then stood. Her mom rose, too, and met her at the door. You're doing this for her, her mom said, touching her cheek. Lila smiled faintly. I'm doing it for us. She took the early bus, sat near the front with her backpack pressed to her chest like a shield. The sky was still dark, the streets still empty, but inside her, something stirred, like quiet thunder. By the time she reached campus, the sun had begun to rise, casting gold across the stone steps. She walked into the lab building, heart pounding. The professor was already there, hunched over his computer. He didn't look up as she entered. Leave it on the desk, he said flatly. Lila placed the notebook gently beside the keyboard. He glanced at it, then saw the plastic cup beside it, covered in loops of multicolored ink. You're still using that? She shrugged. It's what started it all. He raised an eyebrow. You're late, he said. It's 6:20. I said 6. I worked until 1:45. He looked at her for the first time with something like curiosity. You really built the whole thing by hand? No computer, she said. Just the store receipts, some packaging specs, and 3 days. He flipped open the notebook. His brows furrowed as he turned page after page. Arcs, ratios, decay timelines, packaging stress curves mapped onto temperature thresholds, all wrapped in a formula that bent, not broke, when tested. This shouldn't work, he murmured. Lila said nothing. It's crude, chaotic. You've got sauce stains in the margins. I ran out of clean paper. He stopped flipping, stared at a graph so elegant in its simplicity, it nearly folded into the earlier test failures he'd dismissed. He looked up at her. You modeled this deformation rate from heat memory? I call it a breathe curve. The packaging expands and contracts like lungs, but slower. He leaned back in his chair. You're not trained. No. You didn't even know what to call the reaction pattern. I made up a name, she said, smiling faintly. It worked. He rubbed his eyes, then said it. This might actually be viable. Lila blinked. So, I passed? He didn't answer right away. Then he stood and held out his hand. Welcome to the lab. She stared at it, then shook it, her fingers still ink-stained and trembling. Her notebook sat on the desk, torn, stained, full, but no longer invisible. The lecture hall was packed. Word had spread. Students filled every seat. Professors lined the back wall, and a few reporters with campus badges waited near the door. The screen at the front glowed softly, waiting for data that had once failed and now might save lives. Lila sat alone in the front row, notebook in her lap. She wore her fast food uniform under a hoodie. Her hands trembled, but she kept them, folded, tight, and still. The professor entered to silence. He didn't lecture, he simply plugged in the USB drive, nodded to the assistant, and said, "Run the simulation." The screen came to life. Charts, numbers, the old model on the left, Lila's model on the right. Gasps broke the quiet. Her curve bent with the packaging, breathing, just like she said it would. At 78 degrees, the Harvard model flatlined, but hers caught the shift, predicted it, outpaced the decay. A voice from the back. "Wait, is that contamination decay in reverse?" The professor nodded. "Her model accounts for early stage elasticity. We've been measuring surface temps." She measured internal rebound rates. Someone whispered, "How?" The professor didn't answer, but Lila stood. "Because I saw it happen," she said. "The packaging changes. It flexes. That changes how bacteria grow. I started seeing it at work. I just followed it." A student near the front scoffed. "With what? Happy Meal toys and crayons?" Another voice answered before she could. "Actually, it's a textbook example of applied observation." Dr. Myers, a visiting scientist from MIT, stepped forward. "This model predicted a failure our entire lab missed." Heads turned. The scoffing student shrank back. Lila stayed frozen, stunned. The professor cleared his throat. "I doubted her," he admitted, "but she earned the right to be here. She saw what the rest of us didn't." Another hand rose. "So what does this mean, like practically?" "It means," Dr. Myers said, "we've just reduced contamination risk in 24 states, immediately." More gasps. Lila whispered, "I did it." Her professor glanced at her. "Yes, you did." He turned to the crowd. "We'll now open this model to peer review. But let me be clear. This correction came not from a lab, but from the back counter of a fast food chain. From a girl with a worn notebook and a broken pencil." Lila blinked. Her chest felt tight. Not from fear, but something else. A hand touched her shoulder. She turned. It was her mom. Someone had helped her to the front. She stood, still wrapped in the double blanket, tears in her eyes. "I told you," her mom whispered. "You don't need permission to matter." Lila hugged her tight. Applause broke out, then more. Then the entire room stood, except for one student, the same girl who accused her before. She muttered, "She still doesn't belong here." But the professor heard her, and for once, he didn't stay silent. "She belongs here more than most of us," he said firmly. "She rebuilt what we threw away." Lila's notebook still sat open on the table, pages smudged, edges curled, but every number held, and everyone saw it now. The lecture hall had emptied. Only a few lights stayed on, humming above Lila as she sat alone in the front row, fingers still brushing the frayed edges of her notebook. Her mom sat beside her, blanket around her shoulders, silent. For a long time they just breathed. Then her mom said softly, "I wish your father could have seen this." Lila looked down. "He would have been proud," her mom added. Lila nodded once. "He's the reason I started." She opened the notebook, flipped back to the first page, faded, barely legible now, a scribbled date, 4 years old, a circle with the words "bad tuna," "high fever," written in a child's scrawl. Her mom leaned in. "That was the night he got sick." Lila nodded. "I remember the label. It said safe. He trusted it." Her voice cracked. "But it wasn't." The room stayed still. "After he died," Lila whispered, "you kept getting sick too. Not like him, but enough. And every time it happened, I kept the wrappers, the labels. I wanted to know why." I thought maybe if I looked long enough, I'd find a pattern. Her mom's voice broke. Honey, I never asked you to. I know, Lila said quickly. You didn't have to. She held up the worn cup, still wrapped in its napkin. I used this to map the reaction because I didn't have a screen. And I used crayon because I couldn't afford new pens. But it was never about looking smart. I just couldn't watch it happen again. Her mom wiped her eyes with her sleeve. You carried too much, she said. I should have. No, Lila said, shaking her head. You carried me. Footsteps echoed down the hall. The professor stepped in quietly. He paused at the door, unsure whether to interrupt. Lila stood. He approached slowly, holding a folder. These are the test results. Your model predicted every decay point within margin. He hesitated. I wanted to ask you something. She nodded. Why didn't you walk away after the way they laughed? Lila took a breath. She looked at her mom, then at her notebook, then back at him. Because I wasn't trying to prove me, she said. I was trying to protect her and maybe stop someone else from losing what I lost. The professor said nothing at first, then he pulled something from his coat pocket, a new mechanical pencil. He placed it on the table next to her broken one. Use this, he said, but don't throw the other away. Lila smiled faintly. Never. The pencil, taped, chipped, barely holding together, was more than a tool. It was a timeline. Every broken lead, every faint stroke, every mark she'd carved at midnight under that flickering lamp. The professor turned to leave, then paused. We're submitting your model to the National Review Board, he said. I'll list you as co-author. Lila's jaw dropped. Wait, co-author? He nodded. You earned it. Her mom covered her mouth, eyes wide with disbelief. Then Lila whispered, Thank you. The hallway fell quiet again as he walked away. Lila picked up the new pencil, turned it in her fingers, then looked back at the old one lying beside her notebook. She tucked them both into her bag. As she stood, her mom slipped her hand into hers. Let's go home, baby, she said. Lila nodded, but before they left, she looked back at the whiteboard, the faint lines of her model still glowing under the overhead lights, and for the first time she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt like someone who had changed something. The door to the science wing was locked. Lila stood outside it, gripping her backpack, breath fogging in the early morning air. Her notebook was inside, her model, her proof, her name. She knocked again. Nothing. Behind her, students passed in waves, whispering. She heard it, half-laughed insults wrapped in curiosity. That's the burger girl, right? She faked the data. No way she did that alone. She probably copied it from someone's lab archive. Lila lowered her head, fingers tightening around the fraying strap of her bag. The door finally opened. It wasn't the professor. It was a woman with silver earrings and a clipboard. You can't be here, she said. I'm here to meet Dr. Harron, Lila replied, trying to stay calm. He's requested no outside visitors today. I'm not a visitor. I'm listed as co-author on his current submission. The woman paused, hesitated, then gave a polite but cold smile. We'll follow up with you if that status is confirmed. The door closed. Behind it, her notebook sat on his desk. And just like that, she was shut out. She stepped back, stunned. From the side hallway, a student stepped out. The same girl who had once accused her of stealing. You think just because you had one idea, you belong here? The girl asked. Lila stayed quiet. You're not even enrolled. You don't know lab protocols. You probably don't even know what peer review means. Lila finally looked up. I know what contamination feels like, she said. In real life, in a hospital room. I know how it ruins people. That's what I built from. The girl scoffed. That's not science. That's pity. Lila took a breath. No, that's truth. Another voice echoed from behind them. That's enough. It was the professor. He walked down the hallway, face unreadable. Miss Reyes, he said to the girl, if you'd like to file a formal accusation, be prepared to show your lab notes, timestamps, and corresponding model data. Because I reviewed Lila's logs. I watched her build every variable. I tested it myself. Reyes fell silent. He turned to Lila. Come with me. She followed him down the corridor, heart still hammering. When they reached the office, he opened the door and handed her the notebook. I told them you co-authored the model, he said. They didn't like it. Some want it removed. One even said it compromises the institution. Lila's throat tightened. Are they removing me? He shook his head. No, I won't let them, but you need to be ready. They'll ask questions, challenge your credentials, doubt everything about you. She opened the notebook slowly, saw her handwriting, looping, imperfect, raw, but real. I can't stop them from talking, she said, but they can't erase what I saw. The professor nodded. Exactly. He placed something on the desk beside her, the old broken pencil. I found this in the trash, he said. Thought you might want it back. She picked it up gently. The tape still held, barely. It felt heavier now, like it carried everything. Thank you, she whispered. He looked at her. You stood your ground. That matters more than any title. She tucked the pencil back into her bag next to the new one. One showed where she came from, the other where she was going. As she turned to leave, he stopped her. One more thing, she turned. They're inviting you to defend your model in front of the full department tomorrow. Her stomach dropped. Are they serious? He nodded. And I want you to be. She paused, then said quietly, Good, and walked out, her notebook pressed to her chest like armor. The faculty hall was quiet. No applause, no introductions, just the hum of an overhead projector and the sound of chairs creaking as professors shifted in their seats. Lila stood at the front behind a metal lectern far too tall for her. Her backpack rested at her feet. Inside it, the worn notebook, the broken pencil, a crumpled fast food napkin with one last calculation written in blue ink. She adjusted the mic with trembling hands. My name is Lila Ramirez, she said. I'm not a student here. I work at a fast food counter in Houston. But this, she lifted the cup, this is the reason I'm here. Murmurs flickered through the audience. Some professors looked down at their notes. Others looked annoyed. One rolled his eyes. She set the cup down and clicked the first slide. A bacterial growth curve blinked onto a screen. Next to it, the original Harvard model, then hers. The room went still. My model uses real-world packaging behavior under low-grade thermal shifts, she explained. What I call the breathe curve. Most current systems treat packaging as static. It isn't. It changes under heat, and that change, she clicked again, alters how bacteria multiply, especially during transport. A professor in the back raised a hand. And where exactly did you conduct your experiments? On receipts, soda cups, ketchup lids, my apartment floor, and a lamp that flickers when the microwave runs. A few chuckles broke out. One professor didn't laugh. He narrowed his eyes. Are you asking us to believe a girl with no lab access discovered what an entire research team missed? Lila didn't blink. No, she said. I'm asking you to look at the data. The professor smirked. And how do we know it's yours? That's when the door opened. The professor from before entered. He wasn't alone. Two assistants followed, one carrying a stack of folders. The other rolled in a screen. Because I watched her build it, he said, stepping forward. He handed the folders to the panel. Here are her logs, every test, every timestamp, cross-verified. He turned to the doubting professor. She documented every pattern manually. I checked it myself. The assistant flipped on the screen. A live simulation appeared, run from Lila's model. Next to it, 3 failed corporate tests, one by Harvard's own lab. She predicted the failure point to within 0.3 degrees. The professor continued. And she did it using recycled paper. Silence. Someone whispered, "That's not possible." Another voice, "She used a crayon." Lila stepped forward, her voice steady now. "I used whatever I had," she said. "I built it for my mom. She got sick from bad packaging. No one cared, so I started looking. And I didn't stop until I saw what was missing." She opened her notebook, showed the pages, smudged, bent, but full of life. "This is my work," she said. "All of it." One of the senior faculty members, silent until now, finally spoke. "I spent 6 months trying to fix that model," he said quietly. "We never even thought about the packaging elasticity." He looked up at her. "You did this without equations?" "I used curves," she said, "and receipts." He gave a faint, disbelieving laugh, then turned to the others. "She's right." Another professor nodded slowly. "We couldn't reproduce it, but this tracks." The room shifted. Lila breathed in, deep, full. The panel chair stood. "We'll issue a formal statement by morning," he said, "and her name stays on the model." The professor beside her placed a hand on her shoulder. "They can't deny it now." She looked at the screen, her work glowing back at her, then down at the broken pencil still sitting in her palm. Proof she never stopped writing, even when no one believed she could. The sun was low over the campus lawn. Lila sat alone on a bench near the courtyard fountain, notebook in her lap, broken pencil in hand. Her shift was over, but she hadn't gone home. She couldn't, not yet. The past 2 days had moved too fast. The hearing, the defense, the moment her model was accepted, then questioned, then proven. But still, she wasn't a student. She wasn't on any roster. She had no ID, no login, no access to the labs she'd outperformed. Just a girl with a worn notebook and a question no one else thought to ask. Footsteps approached. She looked up. It was the professor, the one who had first doubted her, now walking slowly, hands in his coat pockets, his tie loosened like he'd been fighting someone behind a door. "You busy?" he asked. She gave a faint smile. "Only doubting myself." He sat beside her, silent for a moment. Then he pulled something from his pocket, a small, sealed envelope. "What's that?" she asked. He handed it to her. She opened it carefully. Inside, a printed letter on Harvard letterhead. No logo, no fancy words, just a single sentence. "We offer full admission and scholarship to Lila Ramirez, for demonstrated brilliance in applied systems modeling. Lila froze. This isn't real, she whispered. It's real, he said. And it's yours. She looked at him. But I never even applied. You didn't need to, he said. They saw your work. They know who you are now. Her voice cracked. You fought for me? He nodded. They wanted to bury the whole thing, hide the fact that a teenager working fryers solved a problem our labs couldn't touch. But I told them, you either admit her or you admit you failed. Lila blinked away tears. You believe in me? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I didn't. At first, but I watched you build a system out of napkins and recycled paper. I watched you stand up in front of people who were paid to dismiss you. You didn't just prove a theory, you exposed a blind spot we didn't know we had. She looked down at her pencil, the tape fraying at the center, then back at the letter. What now? She asked. He smiled. Now, he said, we build this together. A gust of wind stirred the edge of her notebook. She closed it gently, held it tight. I don't even have a laptop, she said, or a dorm, or... Stop, he interrupted, one step at a time. She laughed through the lump in her throat. I'm scared. Good, he said. That means you're awake. Her phone buzzed, a message from her mom. You okay? I'm heating up soup. Come home soon. I love you. She texted back. Yes, I'm okay. Better than okay. I'll explain when I get home. Then she looked at the professor. Can I still use my old notebook? Use whatever works, he said. But bring the pencil too. I think it deserves its own display case. She stood, back straight, shoulders steady, no longer invisible, no longer just anything. She walked away, envelope tucked under her arm, notebook still in hand, as the campus lights flickered on one by one, like stars, finally recognizing that the auditorium was lit in gold, not the soft glow of overhead lights, but the kind that came from camera flashes, stage spots, and the low hum of whispered names traveling up a carved marble wall. Lila stood behind the curtain, fingers gripping the edges of her jacket. Not a uniform this time, not a hoodie, just a clean blazer borrowed from a friend, sleeves slightly too long. In her pocket, the broken pencil, a symbol she couldn't part with. She peeked out at the crowd, hundreds of people, faculty, families, journalists. Her mom, sitting in the front row holding back tears behind cheap reading glasses and a camera that blinked red. The speaker's voice echoed across the hall. This year, we welcome the youngest systems modeling scholar in the university's history, someone who rebuilt a broken model from a kitchen floor, who proved that brilliance doesn't come from where you sit, but from why you stand. The crowd hushed. Lila froze. Her legs didn't move. Then, the professor appeared beside her. He leaned close. You okay? She shook her head. I don't think I deserve this. You said that yesterday, and after the hearing, and before you passed the review board. She looked down. I keep waiting for someone to say it was a mistake. He held up a hand, and in it, her notebook, pages stained, edges curled, still held together with tape and purpose. They didn't give you this, he said. You gave them this. Her eyes burned. I did it for her, she whispered. He nodded. Then do it again. Go take the stage. The announcer's voice rang out. Beside a display table lined with posters and sample packaging stood Lila. She wore her lab coat now, but her notebook still peeked from her backpack taped and smudged as ever. The broken pencil sat in the front pocket, always with her. A nurse approached, holding a box. "We just got the new packaging shipment," she said. "All of it based on your model." Lila opened the box carefully. Inside, new food containers, brighter labels, embedded temperature sensors, flexible but heat-resistant, labeled with predictive decay curves, color-coded for public use. "Feels weird," Lila whispered, "seeing it in real life." The nurse smiled. "It's not weird. It's needed." Just then, a woman stepped forward, grocery bag in one hand, a young girl clinging to her other. "Are you the girl from the TV?" she asked. Lila froze. Yeah." The woman smiled. "You saved my daughter." Lila blinked. "I don't understand." "We were using the old meal kits. Didn't know the storage temp was off, but the new packaging turned purple. I checked the warning, took her in before she got worse." The little girl looked up at Lila with wide eyes. "Thank you," she said. Lila knelt. "No," she replied gently. "Thank you for trusting it." The clinic director called from across the room. "Lila, press once a word before the presentation." She stood, gave one last smile to the mother and child, then made her way to the hallway. The camera crew waited. The same professor who had first doubted her now stood at the podium, adjusting his notes. When he saw her, he grinned. "Half the country's using your curve now," he said. "CDC wants a partnership." Lila's face tightened. "Are we ready for that?" "You tell me," he replied. She looked down at her phone. Hundreds of messages, data reports, global graphs showing food safety spikes. Her model had lowered a spoilage risk in 31 states and was being translated into 5 languages. Still, she didn't feel like a genius. She felt responsible. The director stepped up. "Ready?" She nodded. They rolled the cameras. "Today marks the formal adoption of the Ramirez curve across all national food packaging systems," the speaker announced. "Developed not in a lab, but in a kitchen, with no funding, just grit, care, and a pencil." Lila stepped to the mic. Her voice was calm, steady. "This model wasn't meant to impress anyone," she said. "It was meant to stop people from getting hurt. My dad, my mom, maybe your child, your neighbor." She held up her notebook. "This isn't a story of science alone. It's a story of listening to the people no one asks. The ones mopping the floor, filling the fryer, bagging the food." She pulled the pencil from her pocket, held it up. "This broke a dozen times, but I kept taping it because the work mattered more than how it looked." A pause. "This is for the ones who are told to be quiet, told they're not enough. You don't have to wait to be allowed. You just have to start." When she finished, the room clapped. But the sound that meant more was the quiet nod from a woman in a scrubs, or the whispered "thank you" from the mother near the exit. Back in her dorm that night, Lila opened her notebook. On the last page, she drew a curve, not one for bacteria or heat, but for hope, from silence to change, one worn pencil at a time. The rooftop was quiet. Lila sat cross-legged near the edge, city lights blinking below like the scattered stars. Her lab coat lay beside her, folded. In her lap, the same worn notebook, now filled to its last page. Tucked into the spine, the broken pencil, taped and dulled but never thrown away. The wind carried faint music from a street party down the block. A mural had gone up that week. A girl with a fast food visor holding a pencil like a torch. She hadn't seen it in person yet, didn't know how to feel about it. Behind her, the door opened. Her mom stepped out, 2 cups of tea in hand. "You should be sleeping," she said, sitting beside her. "I couldn't," Lila replied. "Too much in my head." Her mom handed her a cup, then glanced at the notebook. "You finished it?" Lila nodded. Her mom smiled. "What now?" Lila stared at the skyline. "Now, I start a new one." A pause. "I'm scared, Mom. People keep asking what I'll do next, what I'll solve, but I didn't plan any of this. I was just trying to stop something small, and it became big." Her mom placed a hand on her shoulder. "You didn't make it big," she said. "You made it true. And truth always grows." Lila exhaled, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a new pencil, sharpened, smooth, unused. She looked at it, then at the broken one. "I don't want to lose who I was," she said. The girl who sat on the kitchen floor, solving patterns on napkins. "You haven't," her mom whispered. "You just learned how far those patterns can go." Lila opened the notebook. On the last page, she wrote one line: "Talent isn't where you serve, but where you dare to change." Then closed it. At sunrise, she stood in the new lab they'd given her. Space with whiteboards, clean desks, and walls that smelled like fresh paint and possibility. But taped to the far corner of her desk, the first cup she ever used, cracked, ink stained, and beneath it, a quote written in purple crayon: "Look closer." Students filed in, young, nervous. One boy held up a diagram, unsure of his lines. Lila bent beside him. "You don't have to be perfect," she said. "You just have to be curious." He smiled. She moved on, then stopped at the window, looked out at the world below, different now, but still full of things no one had seen yet. A knock on the door. The professor stepped in, waved a newspaper in the air. "You made the cover again," he said. "They're calling it the fast food formula." Lila groaned.
Perfect.
"I liked it better when no one was watching." He grinned. "Get used to it." She turned back to her students. Her hands rested on the desk. "Some of these kids," she said, "they're smarter than I was. They just need someone to see them." The professor nodded. "And now, they will." Lila reached into her bag, pulled out a new notebook. Blank, clean. She opened it. On the first page, she drew a simple line, a curve bending, breathing, changing. Then looked up at the board. The class waited, and she began. From the back of the room, her mom stood quietly, watching her daughter teach. Not from behind the counter, not behind the curtain, but in the open, where she'd